And good evening. No, not good evening. It gets it wrong straight away. It's afternoon. I'm so used to saying good evening because that's when I normally stream, right? Dear, never mind. It's getting to me. It's this lockdown, right? It's all getting to me. It's all getting to me. I'm losing it. Never mind. Anyway, we are here. What day is it? No, it's Saturday, right? It's Saturday afternoon. So yes, welcome to my retro stream. This is a new thing, okay? So I'm going to start building this up over time. So basically, this time last week, I was playing a retro game because of virtual Elite Community Meet, and it seemed to be quite a popular stream, right? So what I would quite like to do is revisit my youth a little bit. So it's total nostalgia fest, right? So I'm starting off with the ZX Spectrum emulator that you've seen. Now, the ZX Spectrum was the computer I had, right? So I'm very, very familiar with it. But I'm quite keen to expand out from it eventually because I had friends who had the Commodore 64, not surprisingly, and the BBC, and there are lots of other games available on those 8-bit platforms, so I'm quite keen to maybe go and visit some of those as well. But for the time being, what I wanted to do, now I've been having a little look around about the ZX Spectrum version of Elite, and nobody seems to be quite definitive about some things about it, right? Mostly around the missions that were in the game. And I can't find, unless anybody else can point me out. And Winnie, thank you very much for that link, by the way. I did have a review of that, and it does tally up quite well with what I know. But as far as I've been able to tell, nobody on YouTube anywhere I've got no video evidence of the ZX Spectrum missions in Elite. Now, there are supposed to be 4, okay? There are supposed to be 4. And the first one is the Supernova Mission. There's supposed to be a cloaking device mission, where you can effectively shoot down another ship and get a cloaking device, which is quite cool. And I have seen the cloaking device operating in game, so I know that's definitely the case. There's supposed to be I believe a Thargoid Documents one, which sounds quite similar to one of the early BBC missions. But there's also reputed to be a Thargoid Invasion, which sounds quite exciting. In the Spectrum. Now, it's going to take us a while to get there, right? Because I'm playing the game from scratch. But I'd like to see if I can find those missions in the game, right? So, Alien, no, there's no Trumbull's mission on the Spectrum. The Trumbull's mission, I believe, is unique to the Commodore 64, unless somebody tells me otherwise, because it used the hardware sprite technology that the Commodore had in order to overlay the Trumballs on the screen. None of the other computers of the time had that, so they didn't have the hardware to do it. So the Trumballs, I believe, are only on the C64 version. So, but yeah, this is quite interesting, right? For those of us who are into our kind of retro geekery, is it's what the differences were between all the various differences, because there were some. The game's played in different ways. So anyway, so let's get on. Now, I had a save game. Which is totally useful. So I can go back to where we were if I can find the correct folder and get the right timestamp, which is there. There we go. Right, ZX Spectrum. There we go. So anyway, do say hello to the chat. A few new folks on the stream. Alien Commander Kelvinator, Nomen Lunae. Nomen Lunae, that's from Jet Set Willy, isn't it? Is that right? Am I remembering that correctly? Kelly Bagler, always good to see you, sir, for a retro stream. Winnie 1974, Prior, good to see you too. Dr. Invertius, good to see you as well. The Real White Wyvern, hello there, Josh, good to see you too. And Nomen Luna, I get some geek points for getting that right. Excellent. And the Gogs, good to see you as well. So good to see all of them play through. Now, I am playing the ZX Spectrum version of Elite. Now, as I showed you last week, I do have a ZX Spectrum, right, and I will attempt at some point to get it running for you. It does work, but I don't have a monitor at the moment I can plug it into reliably. And when I tried filming it with the camera, it was ghastly. You couldn't really see it. It wasn't great quality anyway. So I am using an emulator. I'm using Spectaculator 8, which is one I bought a little while back, which it seems extremely faithful to me as to how the Spectrum played. I'm running it in the normal 48K mode, which is the original 1983 Spectrum configuration for 48K, and I've got no cheats enabled, no speed ups, nothing at all. There are cheats I can can use, right? But I'm not using any of them. I don't know if you can. It's not showing up on the screen, but I have the option to add in things like the ZX Interface 1 and Interface 2 and multiface and all sorts of things. I can adjust the CPU speed of the computer as well. It's doing a default emulation at 3.5 megahertz, right? So I'm keeping that the same. I haven't put any pokes in. For those of you who remember all that kind of good stuff, there's no pokes and peaks. We're not cheating, okay? We will be playing the game as close to how it's supposed to be as we reasonably can, right? In order to kind of get that authenticity. And I want to trigger the missions the way they're supposed to be. So kind of all kind of good stuff. Was it just a mission after 24 hours? I can't remember. Yeah, it all fades into the memory a little bit. So we're going to try and work that sort of stuff out. But anyway, we are here. Where are we? I'm just trying to remember. We are at DSO at the moment. Now, I'm just doing a very simple milk run at the moment to get enough cash to buy a few various bits and pieces for that. Where's the badge? Oh, well, I suppose I should have the Elite badge on, shouldn't I? I kind of only stick that on for Elite Dangerous. So I'm going to see if I can... somewhere, I've got my Retro Elite... Before Elite Dangerous badge, right? So I'm going to dig that, because that's an Elite Dangerous badge, right? So that doesn't apply today. I need to go and find my other one. I've got an Elite badge. I need to go and look it up. I will get that out for next week. Ethnification greetings, good to see you. Turbo J227, love this, let's go. Off we go. Yes, we will definitely get rocking and rolling in one. No size. I played Elite for hours and hours on the Atari ST and don't remember ever seeing any of those. Yeah, the missions take a while to trigger, right? There's a few conditions, and we're going to see if we can work this out with a bit of. Some of the missions are rank related. I think some of them trigger it competent. Some of them you have to be in separate. A different galaxy as well, so we're going to have to work that out. Now, right now, we were playing for about 2 hours last week, and we managed to we started with 100 credits, we've ended up with 1,000 credits. That's as far as we've got. But it does start to build up a little bit now because we've got a basic amount of cash. And then I want to spread out a little bit and go to some slightly more interesting places. But what I want to get is a docking computer, because that's going to speed up the gameplay a lot, right? Because the docking part of the game is like 5 minutes of very dangerous flying around and getting bored, right? So we will get a docking. Our objective today is to get a docking computer. That's the one thing I do want to get. So we're still stuck in this part of the galaxy. I'm going to buy fuel. I think we've got to. I imagine we've got to get cargo. It doesn't look like we've got anything on the ship. No, we haven't. So let's buy some cargo. We're in DSO, so we're just going to buy food. And some textiles. That means we've now got a full hold. We will at some point buy, as you can see on this screen, we will buy the large cargo bay, but for 400 that allows us to carry more stuff, right? But I want to get that docking computer, and that's quite expensive, right? The docking computer is 1,500 credits, which is quite a lot at this point in the game, but it's incredibly worth having. And an ECM system is extremely useful as well, because it's quite good defensive when we go into slightly more dangerous systems. So we're working on that, right? That's what we need to get to. Right, so we are off to Leasty still. There it is. And I'm going to launch from sound effects. Off we go. Right. So hyperspace. Let's hope we haven't got the witch space thing collected. Because we had that switched on, do you remember? Pause the game, press F. So I didn't switch it on, that's good. Okay, I think it resets itself every time you play. So for those of you watching with an Elite Dangerous view of this, you can think, what the hell is this? This is the original ZX Spectrum version of Elite. Now, it's not the original Elite. That obviously came out on the BBC microcomputer. But the reason I'm playing this one is because this is the one I had, right, as a kid. This is what started my my love of the game. We are now mass locked. I have to wait here to get into the space station. So docking computer really gets rid of this bit, because the moment the S appears in the bottom right of the screen, let's get rid of that mouse, sorry. I can press docking computer, and then this whole bit of this part of the game can be skipped, right? It's a massive time saver. But right now I can't afford to get the docking computer, so I need to do, dare I say it, it's playing the game, but we sometimes call it grind nowadays. But it's just it's quite mellow, this bit, right? You just you're in a safe zone. The S either stands for space station or it stands for safe. I'm not quite sure what it stands for. You'll notice there's an equivalent gap in the HUD on the opposite side for another character, and that is the E, which is ECM. When an ECM system is activated, you'll see the E flicker up, but we haven't seen that yet because we've not gone anywhere dangerous. So Kelly Banglass says, for me, 8-Bit Elite is the game. It kind of is, right? This is the game that changed the mould a lot. You know, this is one of the games that back in '84, you know, we were still very much coin-op games, right? So you put your 20p or 10. What was it? Was it 10p or 20p? I can't remember. No, it can't have been 20p. They hadn't been invented, had they? It must have been 10p. In the arcade, you put your 10p in. You get 3 lives, and your goal was to hit the high score. And then you'd last 5-10 minutes depending on how good you were, and boom, then you'd have to put another 10p in, right? And the first games that came out, was it 2 times? That was expensive, wasn't it? 2 times 10p. That's my entire pocket money for the week for one game. Look at that frame rate. That's at least 1 frame per second, because the Spectrum version always chucks a lot of pythons out of the space station when you arrive, which is a bit weird and a bit annoying actually, and sometimes occasionally a bit dangerous. But you know, it's one of those things that the Spectrum version does. At least it makes you feel like there are other ships going around doing things. It makes you feel like you're part of a kind of living, breathing universe, which was quite impressive on this whole kit, right? 2 times 10p. Too late for me. First was Frontier, then played Elite Plus. Yeah, so this is for those of us who are quite old now, right? And there we go. So the Spectrum. Oh, there's a cup of tea approaching from the left-hand side. Yay! Thank you very much. That's awesome. I like my family. They're not bad. So I've got a cup of tea. Fantastic. Right. So on the rear view, there's the space station. Notice how the frame rate picks up when there's nothing on the screen to draw. That's how primitive this technology. Now, for those of you who aren't familiar with these 8-bit computers, they were, you know, if you get, there's another Python. Look, it's chucked. There are 4 Pythons now in the vicinity, so that's sometimes more traffic than you see in the actual Elite Dangerous, right? They are looking a little bit incestuous there. Why is it always pythons? I don't know. I don't know what those 2 pythons there are doing. Right, so this is the hardest part of the game actually, is docking. Right now, I'm a little bit of an old hand at this, so we should be fine. But it can be tricky for new commanders, right? Look at that, like a boss. Good luck, Doc. No, I know, but the muscle memory is still there. 35 years ago now. So let's sell that. So that's good fun. Cup of tea has arrived. Fantastic family. Now we've got plenty of cash. At this point, all we're doing is we're just filling up with the highest profitability stuff we can, which is, now it's worth remembering luxury is 84 here, because what you used to do with this game, right, is you used to write all the prices down on bits of paper and store them. Right, so we should be able to get close to 15 tons. Yes, look at that. Oh, and we can buy 1 ton of machinery as well. Look at that. I've done my maths correctly. That leaves us without any money for fuel, but we've got enough to get back. I'm going to save my game, which isn't a cheat actually, because you could do this in Elite. Oh, can't save it. Why can't it save it? Probably because I moved the folder. There we go. Just quick save that. Right, so then we can launch back out. So yeah, so back in the 70s, nobody in the UK had a computer at all, right? I was a kid at school, primary school at that point, and my dad, fortunately, was an electronics engineer, and he was able to build a computer from scratch based on circuit boards from magazines. So he was a hobbyist electronics person, and he built a computer in 1977 based on the 6502 chip, which later powered the BBC. But this was pre the BBC times, and he built a computer, and we had it at home in 1978. So I at the age of 8 in 1978, I had an 8-bit home computer. No graphics, but it did have a text display that appeared on a TV, because that's how you did it, right? Okay, so, and this computer, you may or may not have heard of it. It's an American model, which over in America was called the Ohio Superboard. In the UK, it was named the CompuKit UK 101. And if you want to look that up, you can. That looks like an asteroid. Yes. And I get half a credit for destroying the asteroid because it's a hazard to the space lanes. There we go. Oh, there's another one. So back in 1978, I had a computer. Now, I remember very distinctly my mates at school going, "No way have you got a computer. Nobody's got a computer at home. That's insane." I've got a nasty feeling that may not have been an asteroid. Let's give it another blast. It's not firing back. Oh, it was an asteroid. Takes 3 hits with a pulse laser. There we go. That looks like another ship. And it's a Python. Yay, just for a change. I used to like this bit because you can watch the other ship go past the viewer, right? So that is definitely a Python. I recognise the shape. And as it goes along the left-hand side, we can watch it go past. Dun, dun, dun. There you go, look at that. And it will appear on the rear view. Does make you feel like you're in a proper universe. It was one of the first games that gave you that real feel of being in a universe. But my first computer was a CompuKit UK 101. Now, you want to look that up. I'll just bung the name in the chat for any of you who are complete computer historians. There you go. That's what it was called. And I learnt BASIC on it. It had Microsoft BASIC on it, right? So a company that nobody ever heard of, Microsoft, who are they? But had Microsoft BASIC on it, right? So I learnt BASIC on this, and I learned a little bit of assembly code on the 6502 processor. And so by the time the BBC and the Spectrums rocked up in the early 80s, I was already quite good at basic programming. So I had quite a head start on most of my contemporaries, which actually did ultimately catapult me into a career in the IT industry, right? So this computer is not only, to me, it's a games machine, it's the foundation of my career. So I have great affection for this little 8-bit machine. These machines are, by today's standards, they are laughably primitive, right? But right back then, they were the cutting edge of innovation. These things were they weren't cheap, but they weren't outrageously expensive. Okay, so when the BBC first came out, I think I'm right in saying it was £299 or £399, depending on the configuration, right? Which was a lot of money back in the day. That's probably 4 or 5 times, given inflation now, it's probably, you have to multiply those numbers by 4 or 5 times to get in the, so you're talking coming up for £2,000 worth of computer today, right? You don't, unless you're really quite a hardcore gamer, you don't spend £2,000 on, on a gaming rig. Well, you can, obviously, but that was a lot of money for people to shell out on a computer back in the 80s, right? Now, the Spectrum is a cheap and cheerful one, right? So Clive Sinclair was in some ways quite a clever man. He was a bit of a nutter, let's be fair, but he was quite a clever man in the sense that he was able to look at the design of these things and simplify them dramatically. So what was the bare minimum he could get away with? That's what he got away with, right? So where the BBC had a sound chip and it had a joystick interface and it had RS-232 ports all in the back of the machine and all sorts of stuff like that, and multiple different modes for different graphics. Spectrum had none of that, right? Had virtually no expansion capability at all out of the box. It had no sound chip. It just could operate the speaker and you basically gave it the frequency. That's all it could do. It had no graphics modes at all. You just basically had the text interface and the ability to chuck pixels on the screen. It was incredibly primitive, but it was cheap. Okay, it was cheap. It was a third of the price of the BBC for similar kind of capability at an approximate level. And as a result, the Spectrum became an incredibly popular machine outside of the classroom because the BBC was adopted as a kind of official standard for education in the UK in the early 80s, and they lasted for 10 years. Whereas the Spectrum was quite, it was a homegrown British product, so there was a bit of that about it, and it was in massive competition with the Commodore 64, which of course was an American product, and the BBC, which was also British but was kind of the upper class computer. So your average school kid, most of us, probably I would say 50% of us, probably had a Spectrum, right? Because that's all we could afford, and our parents didn't have a clue what all this. Most of the parents, anyway. I was lucky because my dad knew what he was doing, but most parents had no idea what these computers were to be used for. They just knew that everybody else was getting them, so they wanted their kids to have a chance of using them, right? And say, well, everyone's got computers are the wave of the future, you know. And if you don't get a computer, you're going to be behind. And so everyone got a computer, and then tried to figure out what the hell do we use these things for. Oh, watch out for the Python launching into your face. So that was the sort of situation in the early 80s, right? You know, all these computers, and then everyone was like, well, what do we use them for? And people tried to, you know, make libraries out of them, and they tried to, you know, put accounting software on them, and all sorts of things to try and make them useful. Word processing, and people could buy printers and all sorts of stuff, right? Oh look, I'm mostly harmless. I've achieved a rank. Look at that. I'm mostly harmless. That last asteroid, right? I'm bow to my prowess. Mostly harmless. Yay! I've got up a rank. Excellent. Right, so we're doing good. We're doing good. That means that's awesome. Right, how much money? Look, the money is now going up much faster because we can carry more cargo, right? So this is a good thing. So we've almost, you know, we need to clear a certain amount, but that's good. We're getting there. All right, do the old food thing again. We'll go back. Actually, how much are luxuries? Luxuries and the more expensive here, so that's not a good run either. So and we don't want to do anything illegal just yet because that would be bad because we can't defend ourselves. Let's just do a quick save. Buy some fuel actually. And back we go. Yeah, I bought the fuel. Right, launch. There we go. Bask. Yes, I'm mostly harmless. Which is probably better than I am at combat on Elite. But anyway, there we go. That's because the Spectrum, somebody will be able to look it up. I think because it's an 8-bit system, it's a multiplier of 2 to the n in order to get the rank, right? So I think the maximum number you can use here is 6,400, and that's how many kills you need to get to Elite. And I think it starts with 8 kills, gets you to mostly harmless. So we must have obviously just triggered that. So and every 256 kills we actually get on screen, and you will see it eventually when I get there. Is we will get the right on commander will appear on the screen. Okay. When he says that the rank calculations are in the FAQ, that's awesome. So you know, look that up. I'm pretty sure they're the same in all the 8-bit versions because they were programmed in the same way. So mostly harmless. Awesome. I'm really chuffed with that. I've achieved something. No, we don't want to go to Irrev. We want to keep going to Leasty for the time being. I'll try and do something a little bit more interesting in a bit once we've got a little bit of cash. I do want to get that docking computer. That's going to save us so much time playing the game. So we're still doing this milk run at the moment while I chat about the olden days. And some of us are there, right? So I know some of the people on the stream are at least approximately the same generation as me. Those of you who aren't, this is a little bit of a trip down memory lane, obviously, but this is where a lot of gaming innovation was done, right? Because suddenly the game developers. Before we get to the games, right? So parents have bought these computers, right? These 8-bit computers. They've only got 16, 32, 48K of memory. So there isn't much space for programs. Like that is literally 48,000 bytes, i.e. characters. That's all you can put into these computers before they run out of RAM, right? There's nothing else you can do about that. It's a limitation of 8-bit computing. So if you can't get it in 48K, that's it. You're stuffed, right? That's the limitation of those machines. You had to save your file out and do it through. And depending on the computer, and Tuplex is exactly right. 48K was the addressable space of the memory, right? Now you needed some of that space to put the programs that made the computer work in the first place. Did you notice there was a little pirate that just appeared on the edge of the screen, and I just managed to sneak into system space, and then he's run away. Which is quite fun. So that is That's all you could, and you know, we had ROM and RAM back in those days. Okay, random access memory is memory basically that the user could use to store their program, and ROM was read-only memory, which is basically the operating. It's not really an operating system, but it's how the computer works, right? So yeah, exactly right. So Kelvinator there, 64 kilobytes was actually addressable. That's all the 8-bit processor could access. And then depending on the ROM and the configuration, because everything on the computer had to be stored somewhere, right? So the ROM was generally the instructions on how to cater for all the commands that the computer could operate. You needed somewhere to put the screen display, so that was part of that. And then the rest of it was kind of left to you. Now, depending on the design of the computer, all of them implemented in slightly different ways. The Spectrum was one of those that had most of its memory available to the user because it kept its user display here, as you can see, very, very simplistic. And the Spectrum, oddly enough, for a computer that's called the Spectrum, in some ways, a lot of its games lack colour because it has a very peculiar way of dealing with its colours on screen. Whilst the resolution of the display can be, for the time, relatively high res, 256 by 192, its colour resolution isn't, right? So it can't individually colour a pixel on the screen. It has to do it in a block of 8, which did lead to some very, very curious artifacts on some of the games. And it was a very noticeable thing on the Spectrum called color clash or attribute clash, which was just the limitation of the way the Spectrum was designed. Other computers didn't suffer from that, but they generally didn't have the high resolution display that the Spectrum had, or if they did, they didn't have much memory left over once they were in high resolution mode. So you'll notice that on Elite on the BBC actually, that the top part of the display is in high res mode and the bottom part of the display is in a low res mode, in order to allow the BBC to put the colours on. And the Acorn Electron, which was just like a sort of cut down BBC, didn't have that capability either. So yeah, so it's all interesting stuff. And Frank Miner's quite correct. Is Elite worked well on the Spectrum because Elite didn't need much colour because it's space, right? And the Spectrum didn't have any graphics hardware like some of the other computers. And by graphics hardware, I mean something that just assisted with calculations or blitted things onto the screen. Because most of the early 8-bit computers did have some graphics hardware, but it was designed for arcade games, which were sprite driven, right? In most cases. The Spectrum didn't have any of that capability, so anything that you had to do manually in software. And all the Spectrum had basically was raw horsepower. It had no bells and whistles at all. But that was good for things like Elite, you see, because all the sprite hardware and stuff meant nothing for vector graphics. So the Spectrum was actually quite well positioned for vector graphic type games and games that needed a bit more memory. Now, one of the reasons the BBC version of Elite has only got 2 missions is there is no space in memory to put any more missions. The Spectrum version had more available RAM, so we could put more bells and whistles into the version in memory. Now the BBC version could load and unload things from disk, which it did do to give you more ships ultimately than the Spectrum version. But you know, these were the fun things about all the different types of 8-bit computers. They all had advantages and limitations depending on what was going on. So yeah, so that's slowly bringing us up. Cash, we're enlisted, aren't we? So we want to buy those computers. Can we get to? We can't quite yet. Oh, we've now managed to do a full hold of computers. That means we're actually going to make some money now, right? So the Spectrum was much better than the C64 at vector graphics because it had a higher speed processor. Basically, I think the C64 processor was less than a megahertz, as I recall, whereas the Spectrum version is 3.5 megahertz, and that makes a difference when you're doing mathematical calculations. It's not quite fair to say it's 3.5 times faster because it wasn't, because the processor architectures were different between the two machines. So, but the Spectrum certainly had an edge on vector graphics. Now you may be thinking that awful frame rate we saw in space. What do you mean that had an edge? Well, that was good. Okay. Now David Braben and Ian Bell did very clever tricks on the BBC to improve that frame rate on the BBC version, because they only drew half the spaceship at a time. I think I mentioned that last week, and they used the latency of the CRT monitors to make it look like the spaceship was there all the time, which makes it look a bit flickery on a modern LCD. So there's all sorts of weird little tricks like that they used to employ. But so all these computers arrived, right? And the parents were like, you must have a computer. So half of the kids got these computers and half of them didn't know what to do with things. In the early days, we used to buy magazines, right? And they used to have programs in them, okay? And I don't mean programs on tape, which is how you generally loaded things into these computers in the early days. They had programs in text form in the magazine, right? And you'd have to type them in. So you'd be sitting there with your magazine, and they had bugs in them. So, you type your magazine program in order to play a game, and then you'd save it onto your cassette and hope you got it right. And then you had to debug it, because sometimes you'd made some errors typing it in, right? And sometimes they got it wrong on the magazine, so you had to debug your own magazine code in order to do that, right? And then, but the beauty of that was that started teaching these kids how to program. There's a whole generation of us out there who learned to program by typing magazine listings into these computers and trying to get them to work. So all that sort of stuff is quite cool. And then the era of the bedroom gaming coders began, right? Because suddenly people went, okay, well, we can do educational software for these things to a limited extent. We can do a little bit of home admin software for these computers, but games, right? Games. So anybody who had a computer at home could write some software and attempt to flog it, right? And a lot of it was absolutely dire, but some people were really good at it. And there were some legends like David Braben, right? Legends of the time, who built really good games for these early platforms, and had to spend a lot of time getting away from the 3 lives and you're out gameplay that everybody was used to with video games at the time. And Elite was mold breaking in that sense, because it was a game that you could play for hours or days or weeks or years, as we know. Suddenly games went off in all sorts of different directions. So we had things like Elite and Lords of Midnight, and platform games where and strategy games and RPGs and all these sort of things started to appear, right? Because these computers had the freedom to you could do anything. You could do anything you liked. And particularly the beauty of the Spectrum was that because the hardware of the machine was so primitive compared to some of the other 8-bit computers, you didn't have to use the hardware because there wasn't any. So whereas the C64 games tended to take advantage of the sprite hardware and make sprite type games, there was no advantage to doing any particular type of game on the Spectrum. So people just went completely nuts, and every sort of game that you can imagine came out on the Spectrum, because there was, you just made the Spectrum do what you wanted it to do and found a way around its limitations. So the Spectrum, because of its primitive design, actually became a major source of innovation for gaming. So it's a very cool little piece of history, and that takes us up to about 1982 when Elite starts to appear. So I have great fondness for this computer, right? Because and there's a few of you going in the chat going, yes, I'm a developer too, right? Now, I'm not a developer anymore. I was a developer years ago, but I've given it up. But I have fondness for this machine starting my career, and it sits. You can't see it at the moment, but it's on my study wall in a place of honour, right? Because it's important. It's important. Right, so anyway, enough hero worship of the Spectrum. Now, I am going to show you one cheat, okay? And I'm not going to exploit this, but I'm just going to show you how it works, because this was the way to get rich quick on the Spectrum version. And I won't do it. I won't do it too much, because I just want to show you how it works, right? There is a bug, and I don't know if this applies on all the 8-bit Elites, but it certainly applies on the Spectrum version. I'll show you how it works. So have I loaded up? Yeah, I've got all the computers on board, right? So I'll do it once just to show you guys how it works. And this is the famous Hyperspace Docking Bug, right? So what you do, this is definitely an exploit. That's like I say, I'll only do it once. What you do is you thrust away from the space station, you turn around, and you don't rotate any of your axes other than the main one of the ship, right? So you've got a perfect docking lineup, and then you just reposition yourself just a little bit, minding out for the pythons, right? You get yourself right in front of the docking bay with a perfect angle to go straight back in. Then what you do, right? So this is a cheat. Yes, and I will do it at once just to demonstrate it, right? We're hyperspace locked on to DSO, which is where we want to go to our computers. What you do is you press the hyperspace, get the countdown, and then dock with a space station, right? So watch this. Hyperspace, dock. Oh, it blew up! That's not supposed to happen. Oh, okay. I'm going to try that again. I'm glad I saved my position. That's not supposed to happen. Let's find. See if maybe this version's been debugged, right? Maybe I went in too fast. Let me try that again. Maybe the bug's been fixed. That's what you get for cheating. Yeah, I just wanted to show you this once. Dear, that'll teach you. Maybe the bug's been fixed in this version that I've got. Let's try it. Let's try that again. Right. I'm hyperspace on D, so and then what you do is you should Python. Oh, that worked. It worked. Right, I hit the Python. I think I might have destroyed it actually. But what happens is, it didn't work. Oh, that's probably because I didn't dock in time. Right, I'm going to try it one more time. Because I don't need a Python ruining my day like it just did. Right, hang on, let's just try. I just want to see if this, maybe it's been fixed. But certainly this used to be a bug, right? So you'd line up, you would hyperspace, and then you would dock. Looks like they fixed it. Maybe they did. So maybe it looks like it's... Oh, no, hang on a minute. Yes. Exploit. It worked. So what happens is you hyperspace in sort of in the docking bay and you miraculously arrive at the space station that you wanted to be at. Came to see Drew rock 8-bit and got Drew cheating. So that's the cheat, right? No, I won't exploit it any further. But I did want to show you that there are still bugs, right? In the game, and we can sell our computers. So that was the cheat that a few of us discovered, right? A few of us discovered in the game, which meant you could run between the space stations really quickly, build up massive wadges of cash really fast, right? But we don't want to be doing that ill-gotten gain. So we will play the game properly. But that isn't an exploit. Right? It's the really example early on of an 8-bit exploit, which was in the game. And of course, teenagers figure this out instantly. And it would go around the playground, right? Here's the cheat. And was, oh wow, how'd you do that then? How'd you do that? And of course it would be what, wildfire. It would spread around the UK. But there's no internet in these days, so the only way for these things to spread was through the kids in the playground. Right? that's how it worked. So yeah, so that was an early cheat, and we won't say. I just wanted to show it to you once, but we won't use that again. Now we are approaching a stage of the game where we begin to have our first choices of what are we going to do with our money. Or Crash Magazine cheat section. Yes, I think there probably were a few in those days, weren't there? So we've done some stuff here. We are now mostly harmless, and we only have a front pulse laser. Now, one of the things that's really useful, and we'll do this on the next one, is the large cargo bay. Basically, now it's just to carry more stuff, right? And that's the only, because in the early 8-bit version of it, you can only fly one ship. You can only fly the Cobra Mark III. You start off with a 20-ton carrying capacity, and you end up with a 35-ton carrying capacity, which is the expansion of the cargo bay. And there is the fuel scoop that we can get as well. So we do want to have a look at those kind of things. But we still need to make some more money, right? So back to Leasty we go for now. And this is quite good. Now we do want to have a look at a slightly better run at some point. Now Leasty is a what did we decide it was? It's a corporate state. It's rich industrial. Now what we really want is a poor agricultural system. To flip as the opposite. Now DSO is a rich agricultural system. It's not ideal. Real profits are to be made by finding a poor agricultural one, and most of the systems around here, as you can see, are rich because they're kind of near the core world. So if we go onto the map, now here's a system, Zeonce, you may have heard of. That's rich industrial as well. And there's also Tianisla, which many of you will have heard of from the Law Tour. That's rich industrial as well. So there's nothing immediately around here that offers us a better route. Cuteria is quite good. That's rich industrial, but that's quite dangerous. I don't know if there's anything down this way. Rescue is rich industrial. Onrira is rich industrial. Alaza is rich agricultural. What you were looking for? Mainly agricultural. Okay, so that one's a bit better. This world is a revolting dump. Nice description. And that one is right down rich agriculture, but that's feudal. That's not a good place for us to go right now. So we don't have an immediately good accessible point to go to in terms of a good trade route. So we're going to stick with what we know for the time being, build up a bit of cash. Then we can go up and do some more interesting stuff, right? Once you've got a slightly better ship. So the magazines that came out, because this was pre-internet, right? Oh, there we go. I've got a tip. Eisenhower next to Cuteria. We'll double check that. Okay, let me have a look at that when we next docked. The magazines were a big thing. There was no internet in those days, and it was even there were some BBSs, but you had to pay telephone bills to actually use them, so your parents would never let you have a go. At least mine wouldn't, and we didn't have a modem anyway for years, right? And that was, I think, more prevalent in the States than it was in the UK, and it didn't really hit a mainstream thing in the UK for most users. And there were things like Prestel and stuff like that came along in the 80s, but there was no internet, right? So the only way to swap things around was in the school playground, all through magazines, and the magazines were incredibly important in the 80s so you could find out what the latest gadgets were, the latest cheat codes, the latest games, and you'd go to your newsagent, buy a magazine, and it would tell you all about the latest stuff that was happening on your platform, right? So there were loads of magazines like Sinclair User, Your Sinclair, Crash magazine was a really, really, really good one. That was probably the coolest one that everybody went for. And they would review the games, and games reviews became a thing, right? And hardware reviews and all sorts of stuff like that and as the spectrum slowly diversified into different models, and Zap was good as well. Yeah, coolest was Zap. Okay, I'll give you that. And then they started coming with free tapes, right? So you'd buy your magazine for, I don't know what it was. Was it what was a magazine cost? $1.99 or something back in those days? And it would come with a cassette on it, and it would come with like demo versions of games on it. So this started becoming cool things, right? Most of them were rubbish, but occasionally you get a gem on those things, and that was a very cool way. The other way, of course, was the school playground. So, of course, because everything came on cassette, all the school kids quickly cottoned on that if you had a twin cassette deck, right, you could put the original computer cassette in one and blank cassette in the other and dub them across. So computer piracy became a thing almost straight away due to the ingenuity of 13-year-old kids, right? So we were all at it, right? So when a new game came out, some poor sucker would buy it, and the rest of us would pile in and try and copy the cassette. And so you'd have loads of bootlegged games on C60 cassettes, sort of behind the bike sheds in the early 80s, right? And it was just a thing, right? We didn't really care because we were all poor. We didn't have any pocket money anyway. We just about got this computer. So we were ripping games off left, right, and centre. It was very, very bad, and I totally condone that behaviour. Right? It's outrageous. It shouldn't be allowed. And the computer manufacturers fought back, right? They fought back with lens locks, as I showed you, right? Nobody online. I mean, nobody online would copy tapes, right? Home taping was killing the record industry and the computer industry, according to the advert. So it was outrageous, and it's despicable behaviour. But it happened, right? So we were all copying these cassettes, and it became quite a thing, right? We were swapping cassettes between lessons at school. Highly illegal, of course, because we were effectively ripping people off. But the computer manufacturer, the writers of the games, fought back with things like lens locks and the whole tell me what's written on page 46 of paragraph 5, line 3 of the manual, and then I'll let you play the game. So all those sort of anti-piracy things started making their way into the games, right, to stop people, you know, who hadn't bought the copy being able to play it. And then the whole mysterious era of peaks and pokes, right, because of course, if you could load the game in a certain way, you could change the memory values, right, of the computer to bypass the DRM. So it was a classic arms race, right, between the ingenuity of all the 13-year-old kids who were playing these games and people. So I was in on this because I knew how to do machine code, and I was only one of about 2 kids in my school who knew how to program these machines in machine code rather than just BASIC. So basically, whenever a new copy protection system came on, I was one of 2 kids who was like, Drew, you've got to help us. This is a game we want to copy and we can't get it to work. How do we break the copy protection? So I started my information security career as a hacker. 8-bit computer games, so which was slightly ironic, really, given what my job is now and things that I do. But you know, and you learn about the way the computer works, and it was trivial, really, to bypass these things once you knew how they were structured. But they tried, and for most people, you know, the copy protection did present a bit of a challenge, but not for us. It was fairly easy to bypass. And then, of course, you'd have a save version of the game which was free of the copy protection, and you know, it was all good fun. But good times, right? Good times. Right, so I'm now at the point where I've got enough money to buy a full hold of computers, and I've still got 500 credits left over. So it is worth me at this point buying the large cargo bay. So I'm going to buy my first add-on for my ship, which is the large cargo bay, which allows me to buy some more stuff. So now my cargo capacity, if I look on the inventory, is a little bit higher. I can buy some more things. I'm going to buy another couple of tons of machinery in this case to fill up my hole. I can still buy another one. Oh, no, I don't want alloys. I can still buy another ton of computers there, actually, looking at that. So let's do that as well. There we go. And I've just got enough money. Oop, I haven't got enough money for cash. Fuel I have. We're ready to go. Save the game. And back we go. So there we go. And we'll go back to and sell those off. Actually, the first DRMs is quite right. Carbonator action replay cartridge on the C64. So yes, that was a good thing. We had something similar on the Spectrum. That interface 2, I think it was, or one of those interfaces, allowed you to interrupt the state of the computer and save it at that point. So what that meant is that all you needed was one guy with the original copy, and you could bypass the copy protection and then interrupt the game once the game was running and save it at that point. So snapshotting, effectively, yeah. Those things came along and completely bypassed things. So, but yeah, so all those things, you know, that was something that happened in the from sort of 83 to 88. All those sort of things were evolving quite fast, which was all good fun to be part of. So good times, good times. Oh, we have a pirate. Let's go and attack. What have we got? Let's get a missile. Don't want to use a missile, they're expensive at this point in the game. Let's get that mouse out of the way. Oh, there we go. And it's a Python, right? That's going to be relatively easy. They're fairly tough on shields, but they're very low maneuverability. So it shouldn't be a problem to take this down. As you can see, it's not even attempting to dodge. There we go. Right, it's just dropped. Now, it does drop some cannons. Now, I haven't got a fuel scoop right now, so I can't pick this up. But I will. I think I can get a kill for it, though, by destroying it. So it's worth me at this point of the game just shooting it down. I think it counts. There we go. So that's all good. We'll hopefully get to the space station without any further trouble. Oh, there's an asteroid. We can take that out. After just checking that it is in fact an asteroid, right? Yeah, there we go. Oh, there's another ship. Well, that's likely to be a trader. Traders always appear in front of you. The pirates always appear at the sides. So yeah, there might have been kittens in that canister. Yeah, who knows what was in the canister, right? Could have been slaves or something. There's a Ferdinand going past. Always nice to see. They're in the universe of Elite, they're really posh ships that are decked out inside. So who knows what was on. Now they will. We ought to get a fuel scoop next, actually, because then we can take advantage of things like that, and then maybe do a spot of piracy, which can be quite lucrative in this game, actually, because of course you're playing against NPCs all the time. So yeah, maybe we'll be a bad boy commander in this one, right? Who can tell? We should try everything, right? So we'll scoop up things, but you can, some of the ships will drop escape pods, right? And you can scoop those up if you're unethical, because when you scoop them up, they get converted into slaves, and then you sell them at the nearest space station. I always rationalise that by the fact that I was rescuing them in my head. But whether that's actually true or not, so they may end up with a life of slavery. So that's really, really bad. So I had a few copied C64 games, mostly box original. Oh, good for you, Kelly Baglar. That's good. Not because of morals. I just didn't have friends for C64. Smarty for you has an Amiga 500. Yeah, we'll actually move into the 16-bit era at some point and do the Amigas and the Atari STs. And they are nice machines. They are nice machines. I was very envious of them because I had a Spectrum at the time, and when those 16-bit machines came on, they were like, wow, they've got a megabyte of RAM and they're like 5 times as fast, and they've got colours and sound, and my Spectrum looks rubbish. But have you ever mined pythons for the cargo cans? Yes. So we can do a bit of mining of traders. So the Amiga and the Atari. Now, oddly enough, I went to university when the Amiga and the Atari ST were in the ascendancy, and I do remember the fanboyism back then between the Amiga owners and the Atari ST owners. And the Amiga owners were very proud of the fact that, and this is their words, not mine, because I didn't know what was going on. But they were very proud of the fact that there was an Atari ST emulator for the Amiga, or at least an Amiga, that ran faster than a native Atari ST, which I found quite hard to believe, but they assured me it was true. And the Atari ST guys countered with the same. We've got an Amiga emulator that runs faster than the actual native Amiga, and I don't know what was going on about that. But until I pointed out that if you had 2 emulators that could run faster than the native machines, then surely you could just keep running them on top of each other, and you'd have an infinitely fast machine. At which point they kind of went, that can't be right. So I don't know what all that was about. Maybe somebody's more familiar with the Amiga and the ST can tell me if any of that was true. Depends on who you ask. We were proud. Yeah. So ST owners tended to progress from the space. So I must admit, I'd never owned either of them actually, but had I have bought one, I would have bought an Atari ST. I wouldn't have bought a Commodore Amiga, because as far as I was concerned, Commodore is still the dark side, right? Because as far as I'm concerned, the Spectrum versus Commodore 64 rivalry was very strong in the playground, right? So you were in one or two camps, right? You had a Speccy or you had a Commodore, and we weren't friends really. And the BBC, they were just the posh kids with lots of money, so we just beat them up in the playground. It was tough in the 80s, right? So, but Commodore and Spectrum owners were never friends, or at least very rarely, right? You tended to be in one camp or the other. So most Spectrum owners, I don't think, could bring themselves to buy a Commodore computer as a replacement for their Spectrum. So I suspect they went for the Atari ST because it was the alternative machine. But as I understand it, and I'm not an expert, I understand that the Amiga was a rather more solid proposition as a computer than the Atari ST. But the Atari ST did have the MIDI interface, I think, as standard, which gave it an advantage for music generation. But I think hardware-wise, the Amiga had quite a lot of extra supporting hardware for games and music and other bits and pieces, as I understand. I'm not an expert on those games. So the Amiga was very ahead of its time. Lord Arse. Then there was that guy who had an Oric. There was always one kid in the school, wasn't there? Oh, I've got an Oric. Has anyone got any software? No, mate. There's no software for the Oric. I do remember. Oh, the Oric, the Oric computer, which was supposed to be quite cool, right? But I think wasn't it programmed in Forth or something like that. That was yeah, I do remember that, the Oric, yeah, and it was probably hardware-wise, it was probably better than the Spectrum, and because it came along a little bit later, but yeah, it didn't last very long, right? It was soon gone. And there was a Dragon 32, wasn't there? That was around for a little bit as well. And then the Dragon 64, I think, but that seemed to crash and burn. And it was really only the Spectrum and the C64 that had the mainstay by the mid 80s, towards the end of the 80s. And then the 16-bit era started, right? And everything went strange, or stranger. Right. So anyway, we're still doing this run here, but now we can carry more cargo, right? So I've got a full cargo bay there, and let's buy the fuel. How much money have we got? I want to see how much money we've got at the other end, because I want to make sure we can maintain the full cargo bay. That's important at this point in the game. But if we've got enough for a fuel scoop, we will buy one. Quick save. There we go. Let's go back to least and keep chatting, right? And you're quite right, Kelly Bug. It was always about hardware and software support, right? Software support. What software have you got to run on this machine? So the Spectrum was by no means the best machine, and certainly by mid 80s going on to the end of the 80s, neither was a 64, but they had the software, right? And that was the difference. And it started consolidating around that sort of behaviour, and we learned more about it. And the Spectrum evolved. You had the Plus2, which had a proper keyboard. Then you had a built-in tape deck. Then you had a built-in floppy disk drive, and all those sort of things became, they evolved. I believe the Commodore 64 had disk drives as well. And then it kind of gave way to the 16-bit era, which was sort of starting in 86, 87, 88, and then by the 90s, the Spectrum and it were all effectively history. But but it was a good 10-year run, right? We had these 8-bit machines. Codemasters, yeah. Codemasters, they were awesome, weren't they? All those budget labels and selling all the old games off. And by this point, things have moved on, drastically. Computer power was up and coming. I mean, the Spectrum is at 3.5 megahertz. What's the speed of the? Because the Atari ST and the Amiga used the 68,000 processor, as I recall, which is a proper 16-bit processor, right? And I don't know what megahertz were they running at, sort of 7, 8, something like that. 8 megahertz. There we go. Okay, so that's it's a factor of 3 or 4 over the Spectrum already by that point. So and higher resolution graphics and memory and disk drives and forget the tape loading system. There we go. 8 on the ST, 7.1 on the Amiga. Okay, and 68,000. So I learned 68,000 assembler at university. I do remember learning it. That was cool. Totally different from Z80, right? But at least I'd learnt it. Has anyone got a Spectrum Next? Now I haven't got one. I know 2 people who have got one, but I haven't had to play with the Spectrum Next yet. So I'm quite keen to get one of those actually, just because it's fun, right? This retro stuff. Noman Luna's got one. Awesome. So, and is that with the Raspberry Pi? It has an option for a Raspberry Pi daughter board or something, as I recall from. I don't know what else it could do, but it's also got it's got compatibility modes for the Spectrum, but it's also got some of the enhanced modes so that you can do away with the Spectrum attribute clash and things like that, which sounds like quite a cool thing if people can program games for it. Lord Answer's got one. The Speccy was 3.5 megahertz speed, which is quite fast, right? Apparently the Spectrum Next can take that up to 24 meg. That's quite impressive. And it's got Pi 0 on it as well. So what stopped the move from 16-bit to 32-bit to 64-bit? What stopped it? What do you mean? I'm not sure. I mean, they did. They just moved on, right? And interesting enough, having lived through those years, right? I mean, it's history now, but having lived through those years, it seemed like a really exciting time in the history of computers, because every new computer that came out was radically more powerful than the ones that had come before it, right? Radically more powerful. So the move from 8-bit to 16-bit was utterly dramatic, right? So you had 48K of RAM and suddenly you had like a megabyte, right? And that's a factor of 3 orders of magnitude increase in memory storage, and it was just dramatic, the change between those generations, and that was all happening in a relatively short period of time. When and I was a teenager, so very impressionable part of my life is formed around the fact that these computers are drastically changing really, really quickly in my early life, and that definitely Python really need docking control at this port, don't they? Right, I'm going to just turn around here. I'll just fly the planet for a moment. There we go. Just gives us a bit of manoeuvring room. And so that whole Moore's law thing, that's a really good point actually. Computer processing power was accelerating incredibly rapidly in this era. And obviously the games were getting more sophisticated. Everything was getting more sophisticated really, really rapidly. And whilst computers are still today getting more and more impressive, it's not like every few years you discover something quite the same level of dramatic increase nowadays. We're just not seeing it in terms of innovation. It's an era of history that happened, right? And it has formed Generation X, which is what I'm part of, right? It's probably one of the big formative things of our generation. The fact that these computers came in and changed our lives. At the beginning of the 80s, nobody had one. Okay, nobody had a computer at home. So all we had at home in the 80s was record players, cassette players, probably a single telephone, maybe usually a television, and occasionally two, right, if you were relatively rich. But that was it. That was all the electronic entertainment that was in the house. By the end of the 80s, everybody's got a computer, right? And everybody's using computers to do stuff, and it's changed. I mean, I remember at the beginning of the 80s, my parents having a discussion with my uncle about careers and things, and my dad was very in favour of computers and things as a career, and my uncle, who was a doctor, very nice bloke, perfectly reasonable, basically said, that's just absolute nonsense. You want to encourage him to be a doctor or a lawyer or something like that, because those are the careers that pay well, right? And none of them saw. The parents of my parents, who are now in their, my father's sadly passed away, but my mum's still alive. But that generation had no idea what these computers were going to do to the world, right? Absolutely had no idea what these computers were going to do, and how they were going to change, the prospects of my generation in terms of jobs and things, and how the world was going to be different because computers would suddenly be everywhere, in everything, in every job, in every appliance, in your car, in your phone. It was all happening in the 80s, and the 90s kept changing at the same sort of pace. And everything that we kind of use today, your mobile phone, your printer, your laptop, your TV, all these sort of things had their genesis in these computers because they changed society. It was a very, very curious time to be living through, and we look back on it with a lot of fondness now, the 80s, partly because of the music and the dreadful fashions and all that sort of stuff, right? But it was a time of massive social upheaval because of the computer and what it was doing to society. It's quite an interesting historical period, right? And I remember the first colour TV that I saw, thinking, wow, look at that, a colour TV. I remember that very distinctly. I remember the early televisions we had in the 70s, that when you switched them on, you had to wait 5 minutes for them to warm up before you could see an image. And when you turn them off, it didn't just turn off, the screen sort of shrank like this. It would go down to a line across the screen, and then the line would shrink to a dot, and the dot would sit there for about 10 minutes while the cathode ray tube cooled down. And then my sister and I, when we were like 6 and 3 or whatever we were back in the early 70s, would just have a competition, sitting in front of the TV after the program had finished, watching this dot disappear. And it would slowly fade away, and then we'd always say, "Oh, no, I can still see it, I can still see it, I can still see it." And there was a competition how long you could see the dot on the black and white TV, and because it was valves, right? It was just pre-transistor stuff, and really primitive. And I can remember that's the beginning of my life, where televisions that took 5 minutes to warm off and 10 minutes to switch off, and you compare that to where we are today, it's just unrecognizable, right? All that sort of stuff has changed. And these computers, these 8-bit computers, felt revolutionary in the early 80s. They really did make a massive difference. So it's quite funny. Anyway, I'm getting distracted. Where are we? We're in Leasty, right? We've got my computers. Lots of computers. 35 tons of computers, in fact. Oh, I can't even buy 35 tons because they haven't even got 35 tons for sale anymore. I haven't got enough cash. Not quite enough to fill up the hold yet, but we're getting there, which is good. So a couple more runs, we should be good. And then we can buy that fuel scoop and do something a little bit more interesting, right? Yes, but we're making progress. This is good. Quick save, just because. Sorry, I'm just ignoring the chat. Yeah, nobody would ever need more than 640k. Yeah, that was. I believe that's an actual genuine quote, although it's probably nowadays taken out of context quite a lot. In fact, a chap at IBM in the 60s is reported to have said, "I can see a global market for maybe 8, perhaps 10 computers." Of course, I had no idea what was going to happen to the world. It is false. Is it? Oh, okay, it is false. I think he said something along those lines, but it is a false one. But but nobody could really appreciate how each generation of computers was going to make things different. The increase in memory, the increase in capacity. I mean, if you showed me a game like Elite Dangerous today, right, to my 7-year-old self, I mean, I didn't even know what I would. I just assume it was magic, almost. I would have no context. I think what a computer. I don't understand. If you took something like a modern computer game today, back in time to the 70s, everybody would just be utterly astonished because they wouldn't understand how it could be done, because there would be nothing in their frame of reference that would give them a clue as to what the art of the possible could even be, right? So that looks like a cobra coming in here. This guy may shoot missiles at me, which will be a bit annoying. He's attacking me, so he's a pirate. Incoming missile. This isn't good news because which one's the missile? That one's the missile. Missed. Dodge. No, it got me. It didn't kill me. Yeah. Oh, no, that is. Well, there must have been 2 missiles. The first one I managed to... The shields held. The second one got me. I've been killed on screen again. That's just as well. I quick saved it, right? It's still dangerous, right? We struggle. I need that ECM, actually. That's the other one, right? Okay. Yeah, so... the 640k limit was imposed by IBM. Yeah, that was a memory feature, wasn't it, for the early IBM PCs? Let's try that again. Almost got away with that. You've got to shoot the missiles down. So it's a quite dangerous game still, for a trader, because you've got no real defense. One missile will take out all your energy, and if there's a second missile there and you don't shoot it, then that's it. You've had it, right? So we're going to have to try that again. We've got quite a tasty cargo on board, which is why the pirates are popping out a little bit more at the moment. I think it scales a little bit the danger with the amount of cargo that you have. So there we go. So there's a pirate again, because we're carrying more cargo. It's upscaling the difficulty for us a little bit, which is fair enough, right? So the 8088 was a 16-bit architecture, but only an 8-bit bus or something. Somebody will tell me. Oh, this is an ASP. This is annoying too, because he's got a missile as well. I've got to be a bit careful here, because he won't launch his missile until I bring his shields down. So you have to be a bit tactical fighting against these ships, because you don't want to take the missile impact on your front shield when your front shield is down. So there's a bit of tactical play here. Now front shield is down again, so I'm going to wait until I can get on his tail and then blast him. That gives my front shield a chance to come back up again. The ASP in Elite is a military ship, and it's faster than the Cobra, so he can dictate the terms of this conflict. He can decide to run away if he wants, and I can't do anything about it. So he's got the fastest ship. So this is actually quite a difficult opponent. Actually, it's one of the trickier ones. And if you get more than one of these, see, he's outmaneuvered me. He's flipped in behind me, the cheeky monkey. Here he is. Oh, Right, so even if I go to full throttle, I can't keep up with him. And he will turn away. Right, I've got my shields at full power though, so as long as I can stay behind him, even if he launches a missile at this stage, I should be able to ride it out. Oh, come on. I'm having to concentrate on this one. These Asps are one of the nastiest ships in the game, actually, at this level. Oh, he's just checking him out a little bit as well. Come on, come back. Got you a couple of times there. Need that beam laser as well. He's running straight and true now, but he's running away. Maybe he's decided he's had enough. No, he's turning back. Come on, die. Well, here he comes. Get back on his tail. Full power. Oh. And to be fair, the Spectrum version does get its AI. I mean, it's not really AI, it's probably just a series of program moves, right? But the ships do present a bit of a challenge. They do duck and weave and do sorts of. Now, I played the BBC version of Elite, and by comparison, and the frame rate is much better, the sound is much better, and the general pace of the game feels better. But the behaviour of the enemy ships is. It just pulls out of range. Oh no, I've got another pirate coming in. This is not good. I'm having to fight for my life here. I can't get rid of this guy. I've got to get rid of this ass before that other one gets into range. That's not good. So, sorry, I'm not looking at the chat at the moment because I'm trying to concentrate on getting this. Somebody's shooting my rear shield up now. Oh, I'm going to have to break off and deal with this other attacker. He's now in range. I'm going to get a missile target. Oh, what is that? Another Asp? This is not a good day. I'm going to missile him. Fire. Yes. I got one of them with the missile. That was a good shot. Let's see if I can take the other one out. This is the one that first attacked. Oh God, that's another ship. What is going on today? What have I got here? Yeah, that's something else as well. What's that? This game is definitely upping the difficulty on me. I don't know what that is. I'm guessing that's some sort of. Oh. This is not fair. That's an Anaconda, and it's just launched 2 more ships at me. I think I'm going to die here. Right, if I manage to deal with that ship, I think that was an Anaconda, or it was that's a Sidewinder with a. I got that one. Oh, look at my skills. Can I survive this attack? There's definitely an Asp still out there, and there's a Sidewinder out there as well. That's the Sidewinder. Sidewinders are actually quite nasty as well because they're small and quite hard to hit, and they launch missiles, but I managed to shoot that down. Come on, die. Yes, so I've just got to be very careful now to manage my energy, because I'm low on energy, and if I use my laser too much and run out of energy, I will also self-destruct. So I've got to let the energy recharge. Where's that Asp? It's out there somewhere. It's one of these. It's not that one. I think it's still there. It's above me. Little monkey. That's the escape pod. So I've done the right there. I've fought back. Wasn't a very good coordinated attack on the behalf of the other. What is that Asp? Oh, somebody just rammed me. I don't know what that was. Right, what's that? Have I got rid of the Asp? Maybe the Asp ran away. Or maybe I lost it in the confusion. Didn't see what happened to it. That's the escape pod. And that, I think, no, that was the cargo canister. Right, this is the escape pod. No, it's not. It's the asp. I must have hit the escape pod. Right, let's get rid of this asp. I've got to be a bit careful here because I've got no power to the energy banks, and this guy's still got a missile. So I kind of want to just dodge around a little. This is why you do have to play this game tactically, right? Because if he launches his missile at me, I'm toast with my shields down. Unless I can take it on the aft shield. I don't really want an asp up my backside, right? So I'm just going to dodge about. And there's another pirate. I don't believe this game. This is just being mean. Alright, so my shields are almost back up, which is good. It's really scaled the difficulty up because we've got cargo. The pirate's obviously aware that there's something worth having. And it's coming in fast, that ship. I'm going to have to break off and engage him now. What's this? This is a Cobra. Target weapon on him. Cobras aren't too bad, but they do have lots of missiles, so I'm going to missile him as well. And he's got an ECM! No! Right, now there is a self-defense technique here. I can use a missile. If he fires a missile at me, I can fire a missile at him, and he will ECM my missile, but he'll also shoot his own ones down. I don't want to shoot him too hard because he will launch missiles at me at point blank range. I need to be shooting him when he's facing away from me, so his missiles have a longer target range. Now Cobra, obviously I can attack on fairly equal. I've got a target lock with my missile. If I can shoot him before, there he goes. Right, I got him. I'm going to have to outrun that missile now. It got me, but I'm still here. Right, where's that asp? I need to get this asp before it kills me. Where's the asp? Oh, there's a missile. Oh, don't believe it. There was another missile out there. It must have launched two. Oh, after all that, I died. Oh, that was hard work. I feel a bit robbed as well. I was doing quite well. Oh dear. But you can see how hard the game is, right? It scaled it up because we were carrying some valuable cargo. It just kept. We didn't have enough weaponry to to survive. Anyway, so it's hard. There we go. It is quite hard. And I'm using these. Dear, I should have got a laser for the rear. Yeah. So there we go. Never mind. That was good. That was. So you can see, right? You can see why the original. I'm getting a bit hot after all that. You can see why the original game was fun, right? You know, because it was a worthy fight, right? It was a worthy fight, even early on in the game. I thought I took it. How many ships did I take out? About 3 or 4. Did all right. Not well enough. I needed that extra energy unit and a decent weapon, maybe. So, and even elite combateers know when to run, right? So let's try and we need to still beating up this. I got 4 ships. Thanks, Tuplex. That was good. I need to keep doing that. So let's just see if we can get to D7 and sell our cargo again. But you can see that was a safe system as well. But the game knows you're carrying cargo, right? And somehow the pirates get wiser to this, and they home in on you. So yeah, elite can be tough. Elite can be tough. But you know that was a scrap that was, I don't know, was that 10 minutes? It felt like a lot longer than that to me. But yeah, a good scrap, right? A good scrap. And that was what was made the original game so compelling. Those dogfights were intense, particularly when you had a limited ship like we do right now. We don't have enough weaponry or and the ECM. You saw the Cobra there fire its ECM at me. So when I fired a missile, it shot my missile down instantly. And in the early game, the only defense against a ship with ECM was you basically waited till it fired its missiles at you, then you fired the missile back. It would trigger its ECM and would wipe out all the missiles on the screen. I made a tactical error there as I accidentally killed the Cobra slightly too early. It had launched 2 missiles at me. I killed the Cobra, then I had 2 missiles chasing me, which is effectively death because I can't. It's very unlikely I'm going to be able to shoot 2 of them down. I can't outrun the missiles. They're too fast. And I have no ECM. So there we go. Let's see Besieger perform that well. Oh dear, yes. Well, maybe one of these days I'll have to challenge him to a rematch when I got a decent ship, right? Well, maybe we should have 2 ships of exactly equal capabilities. That would be fun, wouldn't it? See how well I actually do. The thing is, I like the combat in Elite because it's kind of quite simple and honest, right? You can have a better ship, but a bit more recharge. But there was some good tactical play in Elite around things like the missiles and the ECM, right? It's very cleverly designed. Before you had an ECM, you had to think tactically about how hard you hit the other ships because they would launch missiles at a certain hull strength, right? You would have to play each enemy off each other, and then once you got rid of the missile, then you could really, really attack them. But you didn't want to hit them too hard when they were pointing at you because the missile would have a straight run. If the missile launched when they were pointing away from you, the missile had to do a loop to get at you, so you did have a chance to shoot it down. So all those things were important when you're fighting the NPCs in Elite. Which direction they're pointing, it's all kind of coming back to me now. So yes, Sidewinder duels in Elite are quite good because, like you say, it's just a level playing field, which is good fun. All right, we should be able to get into here without too much. So anyway, before that, I was waxing lyrical about 8-bit computers, wasn't I? So yeah, the impact of these machines. I mean, it's ages ago now, and I don't blame most people for kind of whatever. It's an old computer from God knows back how far back in the 80s, like 40 years ago now, right? So 1980 is 40 years ago. That's almost 2 lifetimes. Or 2 generations, shall I say? It's a long time ago, right? And but me and people like me lived through this generation, right? This was happening in our teenage years, so it was very, very formative stuff. And in society, this is the flip side to all this. In society, there were lots of changes happening too. Okay, so we had Maggie Thatcher came into office at the beginning of this period in time. Now, wherever you stand on the politics of Maggie Thatcher, she had a massive impact on society, changing the way society worked, restructuring things so that it was a lot more corporate. It was a lot more capitalist than it had been before. She took on the power of the trade unions and pretty much smashed them to pieces at the time. There was the miners' strike. There was all sorts of social upheaval going on in the 80s as well. We had the conflict with Argentina over the Falklands. That happened there. There was all sorts of stuff happening musically as well. Lots of cultural stuff changing in and around the 80s. It was an amazing decade, actually. To look back on it now. I mean, when you were living in it, you just sort of just like you do in any other decade, right? You just get on with it. But looking back on it now, you can see how quite unique a time it was. I mean, people obviously, my parents' generation look back with great fondness on the 60s, right? But I still think in all of my years so far, the 80s is the decade I look back on with kind of, wow, did that all really happen? Because there was a lot of stuff that happened in that decade. I mean, we're certainly the kids of today are going to be looking back on this year, right, as a kind of like, whoa, the whole of society changed in like a couple of weeks because of this virus. That's really thrown a spanner in the works. That's going to be a big thing for many people, obviously. We've all been impacted by it, but the 80s had a lot of stuff in them that sort of changed, and we had the political upheavals, we had the technology change. We had lots of roads being built. We had the aircraft industry changing. Things like the jumbo jets and everything was huge in this sort of era as well. So lots of stuff like that. International travel was booming. Things were really, really altering. You had Helmut Kohl over here, and I can't decide which one was worse. Yeah, it was a fun time, right? Lots of change going on, right? So there we go. We're now at nearly 3,000 credits. We're doing all right. Okay, let's fill up the cargo bay. Get back over there. I can't even do that, so I can do 17 tons. There we go. That's all I can do. Cargo base full, which is a good thing to have, right? But it does make us more of a target for the pirates, which is not so good. Let's get the fuel on board. Did I use a missile? I didn't in this. Yeah, I've got all my missiles are present. I didn't use it in this this one. So quick save. Back to the least. Here we go. Now I want to get this fuel scoop, right? That's the thing, because then we can take advantage of anything that we find along the way. But I kind of do fancy the ECM as well. And this was the thing about the 8-bit version, right? And it's very like Elite Dangerous in the early days, right? Is that you kind of, well, do I buy the ECM or do I buy the fuel scoop, because they're both equally expensive? I think an ECM is going to allow me to survive. So I think you're right, John. Let's get the ECM first, because at least that gives us the defense against the pirates to a degree, right? Because we can't be missiled down, which is an important thing, because our shields aren't strong enough to cope with it at this point in the game. I think you're right. I think I'll go with that, John. I think that's good advice. Sage elite advice from John there. Thank you very much. But it's important, right? Because you've got to balance off the priorities in this part of the game. So we're now leaving the kind of first kind of beginning part of the game where we've figured out the main dynamics and we're trying to understand how things work. We've been attacked a few times. Hopefully we've survived, right? And now we're entering the kind of, right, we need to build up a cache and improve the ship so we can do other stuff. And then we can go off exploring and do a little bit more interesting trade routes and stuff like that, and start having a look around to see what else is going on in the galaxy, and maybe go on a bit of a hunt for pirates and stuff, because we can go into the more dangerous systems once we have a properly spec ship. But in order to get that, we need to have the extra energy unit. That's a crucial addition, because at the moment our shields will not recharge fast enough. We can take 1 or 2 enemies down if we're reasonably good, and I wasn't brilliant, but I was okay. But a third ship will overwhelm us, because the shields will not come back up fast enough and we just get overwhelmed. So we need the extra energy unit before we can go fighting. And to be honest, we need at least a beam laser to take on the baddies and kill them fast enough, because the pulse laser just isn't up to the job, right? So in the original Elite, you've got 4 laser weapons. You've got the pulse laser, which is your basic starting one, which it's okay, but it's not particularly effective and it doesn't fire very fast. The beam laser is basically the pulse laser but on steroids. It fires constantly. The one up from the beam laser, twice as powerful as the beam laser, is the military laser, which also fires constantly but is twice as effective as the beam laser for the same amount of energy output. And then there's also the mining laser, which fires about a third or half the speed of the pulse laser, but each hit is actually quite potent. So the mining laser is actually not a bad thing to have. And what I tended to do is have the military, once I got enough money, I tended to have the military laser on the front mount piece, and I used to have the mining laser on the back, so if anybody tried to sneak up behind me I could mine them. And also, if you encountered an asteroid, we could do a little bit of asteroid mining as well, but still have an offensive military ship, right? So that's probably the configuration I will go for again on this playthrough when we get there. So, in the meantime, let's just make a little bit more cash. Let's see if we can get that ECM, because I think that's going to be a good addition to the ship. Because it's a dangerous universe out there, right? Everyone's trying to kill us, particularly now that we've got cargo. And then maybe the fuel scoop will make sense after that. So, and after the fuel scoop, it's probably a beam laser, right? So we've got some offensive capability, and then we've got a ship that can at least hold its own from a defensive perspective. And then when we want to go on the rampage, we're going to have to upgrade that again in order to get more energy into the ship and defend it as well. So I think that's going. No, so there no. I don't think there's naval lasers in the Spectrum version. Was that a BBC thing? Military lasers is what they're called here. So if you look there, that's the entire list of things you can buy, right? So beam lasers are 1,000 credits. The military laser is like 6,000, right? Okay, so it's really expensive. Okay, so the disc version of the BBC had naval lasers. Okay, so they're even more powerful. So just to run down what you've got, ECM system is anti-electronic countermeasures. Okay, so that kills the missiles. Extra pulse laser, not really worth having. Extra beam laser, definitely worth having. That's probably one of the best early weapons you can get. Fuel scoop allows you to refuel and pick up cargo. Escape pod allows you to jettison your ship and get away. So that's kind of like your rebuy screen for Elite Dangerous. Energy bomb basically is an OP weapon. It's a one-shot device that basically just allows you to wipe out everything on the map. Okay, just by pressing the button. The energy unit's a good thing because it allows you to recharge your shields much faster. Docking computers we've already talked about. Galactic hyperspace, we'll get to that. So that allows you to jump charts. Military laser is expensive, and mining laser, as we've already talked about. So that's what we can upgrade our ship with. So we will get there. So let's sell. Let's see where we are. There we've got nearly 3,000 credits now. Let's buy as much computers with. There's 29 tons worth of computers there. We've got another 6 tons of storage space, so let's do that. Leaves us with 500, which I think is not quite enough to buy the EC. Oh no, the ECM is 600, so we're gonna have to do one more trip. Okay, we're gonna have to do one more trip. We're gonna have to survive one more trip in order to afford it. So let's do that as quick as we can. We've got another half an hour, so we should be able to get the ECM at least. So we've got the large cargo bay, which is good. That means we're making more profits on each run. Let's get back to DSO. Run that gauntlet, because now we've got... yeah, so the energy bomb's kind of completely loose. Actually, just do a quick save. Let's just do a quick save there. Let's get back on that route. And let's fight our way through DSO. Let's hope it's not too bad, because we still got a limp ship, right? We've only got the pulse laser and we haven't got the ECM yet. So we are running a risk now, because the pirates are aware that we're doing this. There's a pirate. And see, the game knows, right? The game knows we're carrying cargo, so it just spawns pirates more. It's a simple piece of RNGesus, I think, as Yamix would call it, right? But it's good in the sense that the game is scaling the difficulty as we take more risk. The game is scaling the difficulty, which is good game design. Incoming missile. Got it. That's a missile, I think. Got it. Yes. Right, there's the escape pod. Now, again, I can't do anything with this escape pod at the moment, so I'll leave it to sit in space. But we could, when we get our fuel scoop, we can scoop that up, right? If we've got space in the ship, and sell him. So I tend to do that. It seems comeuppance to me for the piracy, right? You try to take me down, I will scoop up your escape pod and sell you as a slave. Quite what my parents thought about this, because of course back in the 80s, parents were getting, understandably, right, slightly paranoid about whether there were drugs in school and things like that, and to have a game where you could smuggle narcotics, right? You could smuggle narcotics and trade slaves. Slightly morally ambiguous. So I don't remember my parents ever asking me what I was doing here. But I think if they had seen some of those buy and sell screens, they might what? They might have been a little bit worried about it. So there we go. Yeah, so just catching up with the chat. So yes, the energy bomb was completely useless. Really, it was quite nice to just wipe everything out, but it was quite useful against the Thargoids. Yeah. Does it not work against the Thargoids? Oh, okay. Well, that's an interesting thing. No Manuma, I managed to transfer my original ST save to the PC a couple of years ago. Did quite well at the time too. So there's a screenshot there of No Manuma's ST save. One thing, the C64 seem to have more of its pirate packs. On here, they seem to approach in low ships. They do at the moment. Kelly Magler. What you will notice is when we go to more difficult systems, you will get massive chunks. On the Spectrum version, pirates always appear at the 4 corners of the display. So you'll see them here and here, generally in the safer systems, but in the dangerous systems, they'll appear at all 4 quadrants, and then they'll all try and attack you simultaneously. We'll see that when we go to some slightly more dangerous places. Whereas traders always pretty much appear directly in front of you, so you know the difference. So yeah, we haven't gone to the dangerous systems yet. I do want that docking computer as well. I need more money. But I think you're right. The ECM is the sensible thing to get next, right? Energy bombs take out the Tharglets, but not the Thargoid motherships. Okay, I don't remember that in the Spectrum version, but yeah, you're probably right. I don't remember. I think I always fought them to a standstill in. When we do a witch space thing, maybe we'll take an energy bomb in and try that. That might be quite good fun. I could always face it. Maybe we can do that near the end. Maybe just have enough cash to buy an energy bomb and see what happens. I almost made it, didn't I, last time? But didn't quite survive. I got 2 of the Thargoids with my pulse laser, but didn't quite make it. Never mind, eh? Right, let's just turn around. Looks like another Python has come out. Yes, it has. Oh, I'm miles. I got that approach really badly wrong, didn't I? With the space station there. Apologies for that. I'm normally better at that. There we go. That's not so bad. Let's get the nose down a little bit. There we go. So docking, once you've got the hang of it, docking isn't too bad. It's just very time consuming. That's one of the things that the docking computer gives you. It just gives you a lot of time back in the game, which is a useful thing. Notice you don't have to dock with the bay horizontal. Everyone assumed you had to, but you don't. As long as you go in straight, you're pretty much okay. At least that's true on the Spectrum version. It may not be the case on some of the others. Right, so 3,700 credits now. We're doing okay. I'm going to buy all the food and all of the textiles, and I think we can buy the ECM system here. So I'm going to do that now. So let's upgrade the ship a little bit further, right? So we've now got an ECM system, right? And I'm going to buy the fuel. So that's good. We've made some progress. We now have the ECM. So if we look on there, we can see our equipment. Our ship is getting better, right? We now have large cargo bay, an ECM system, and a front pulse laser. So we're slowly moving up the scale of capability on the ship, right? On the 64, you could also force jump out of the encounter if you had enough fuel, if I remember. Yeah, we can do that on the Spectrum version too. If you make sure you jump far enough, you don't jump too far. Then you can jump back out as a self-defense measure. That definitely makes sense as well. So we've got cargo bay full, we've got our fuel, time for a quick save, and then let's get to at least. Now I'll show you how the ECM works basically. So we'll do that in the next system once we've jumped. We'll even set the hyperspace destination. There we go. Don't want to go there. Hyperspace back to least E. So there we go. Let's get rid of that mouse. Back we go. So basically, when an enemy ship turns up, what we do is we just press the E button, right? And we get that lovely sound effect. And the E lights up on the dashboard, right? And you notice it uses some of our energy. So every time we trigger the ECM, it uses energy from the energy bank, okay, to send out some sort of missile jamming thing. Okay, now that's important because, of course, if you get a lot of missiles launched at you, you have to keep ECMing, and it can suck away all the energy in your ship, and you can kill yourself just by the ECM, right? Because the game is programmed that the moment that fourth energy bank hits 0, you die, right? So it doesn't matter whether you're being shot or whether you're doing it by using your lasers or the ECM. So now there's massive extra power draws, right, on the ship. So we do have to be mindful of that when we're fighting. But now at least we're defended against missiles, so we're making a nice defensive ship, which is a good thing. At least it's a nice safe system, so we shouldn't have any problems here. Probably before a fall, there's still a chance of mucking up the docking. There is a chance of mucking up the docking. You're quite right. You do have to be a bit careful, but as long it's the straightness of the relative angle that counts. At least on the Spectrum version. If your ship lines up with the center line of the station well, that seems to be the thing that it checks. If you're rotating, like you can't see my things, but if that's the entrance, right? And you come in there or you come in like that, it doesn't seem to matter. Whereas if you come in at an angle to the docking entrance, it doesn't like that. That's when you die. So that's the Spectrum version. I don't know if the other versions are different in how sensitive they are to docking, but that was certainly the case on the Spectrum. You don't need to line up and make the docking bay horizontal. It's the angle you're coming in at that counts. And you learn that with a bit of experience, right, and a bit of experimentation. So docking was a big thing. And of course they kind of did that on the Elite Dangerous, right? Docking is still quite a big part of the thing, although you can buy a docking computer. Whereas on the Spectrum, I think people on the chat last week said that the Spectrum version, sorry, the C64 version actually animated the docking, which is quite a clever bit of programming actually. But the Spectrum version doesn't. It just bypasses this whole piece here, and it just teleports you effectively into the space station, which is a big time saver, to be honest, which is quite a nice way. So limited angle docking was viable on the C64. Okay, depending. Okay, that's interesting. I might have to fire up an emulator of the C64 version, just give it a play at some point, just to compare and contrast, maybe a few hyperspace jumps, just to sort of see what the overall difference was. Because I played the BBC version fairly extensively. And I played the Spectrum version a lot, obviously, as you can tell. But I've never really tried the C64 version. I'm playing Elite Fiction Bingo. Drew is avoiding saying... Are we talking original Elite, or are we talking Elite Dangerous Fiction? I don't think I've mentioned any of that today. Or is it the original Elite? Have I not said the DW? Have I not... Is that what I've not said? We haven't talked about the whole fiction. I'm kind of saving the fiction of the original game until we get an opportunity to go to some of the places, right? Because we can actually, even in this game, we can visit the locales that are mentioned in the fiction, and we will get there. So here we go. As long as, again, on the Spectrum version, as long as we line up sensibly, we're pretty good. Maybe not going too fast. So as long as you hit that center point, there, I can go in at a funny angle. It doesn't matter. There we go. The frame rate feels slower, more. Yeah, I mean. So yeah, so I'm just catching up on the chat. It's a lot slower from memory. So does that mean the game feels slower to you as I'm playing it here than you remember, John? Or did it feel faster back in the day, or did it feel slower back in the day? Answer me that, because actually I've checked this emulation against a real Spectrum, and it is almost perfect, virtually frame for frame. So this is genuinely how it was. So the frame, okay, so interesting, you think the frame rate on the Spectrum is slower than on the C64? That's interesting. We'll have to try that. We'll have to try it. I've got a few friends who had a C64, and they definitely tended to agree that the Spectrum version had the edge on the vector graphics, but you know, it's still not great, right? Oh no, the other way around. Okay. So the C64 may have used the BBC trick on not drawing unseen lines. Yeah, so I think it had to, right? They had to optimize it to get it to work at all. Yeah, and it is hard. You're quite right there, Alien. It's harder in 84 because the key press is, that you don't have an analog control. You always up and down. Whereas the BBC did have a proportional joystick, I think, which you could use with Elite, from what I remember. Right, so we've just sold that, haven't we? Yes. So we need to buy, and this is computers we want to buy. This end, we've got 27 tons. Yes, we have. That leaves us with 8, so we can buy 8. That leaves us with, right, we've got 790, so we can still buy some stuff. Now, what could we buy? We bought the ECM. We can now buy the fuel scoop, right? So now we can take it right. Let's buy the fuel scoop. Right, okay, so I've still got some cash. Let's do the fuel. I've still got all the missiles on board. So now we've got a ship that's beginning to feel like it's on its way, right? So we've got a large cargo bay, fuel scoops, ECM system, and the pulse laser on the front. The next thing is to get the beam laser. Then we're actually quite well defended from a trading perspective. Okay, people are not going to want to tangle with us because we're a bit of a harder target. We're not ready to go on the offensive yet, but we're getting close to being a well defended ship. Okay. Frank Miner says it's like arguing which is faster, a snail or a tortoise. To be honest, that's pretty fair, right? That's good. Right, so quick save. Let's not forget that. Right, we are now going to go back to, now this is going to be interesting. We're going back to DSO. This is the first time we've tried to make a run through here with a half decent ship. Okay. We've now got ECM and the fuel scoop. So if we do encounter anything, we can at least take the fight back to it and maybe scoop something up afterwards, right? So let's see what the game throws at this time. I kind of want it to chuck something at me. Maybe the pirate's looking at it thinking, no, I don't fancy taking that on. See, the game's not giving us anything. Close-up Thargoid dogfights got very slow. Yeah, no, that's true on the Spectrum version as well. And basically, it's the number of lines it's having to cope with, right? And the calculations on that sort of stuff. I'm not quite sure what Alien and Frank are talking about now. I'll Google that afterwards. We're not going into the 90s. It's not time to go into the 90s yet. We're still in the 8-bit era. Oh, no, what's that? Is that an asteroid? Or is that an anaconda? It's really difficult to tell. Let's get alongside it. Just have a look. Is it an asteroid? Where's it gone? There it is. No, it's definitely tumbling. So that is an asteroid. I've got to be a bit careful there. I don't really want to be firing on things in the space station space. So I'm going to actually leave that alone. Just in case. Because occasionally the AI doesn't like you firing on space stations. When the S zone is sort of supposed to be a safe zone. You're supposed to basically store your weapons in this zone. There we go. So Carl Bliss, I'm from Brazil. Ah, good to see you, Carl. Thank you very much for popping in from Brazil. MSX computers were far more common here than C64. Play the MSX version of this game and also Frontier Elite. Okay, so I've been told the MSX conversion of Elite is actually really rather good. You can actually download a lot of these from the from Ian Bell's website, he sort of made whether I kind of assume he's got permission to do so. I don't really want to ask too much, but it's supposed to be really, really good. So it's worth checking that out. And I think that was a sort of console, wasn't it? Was it a console-y type computer, or was it a proper computer? Spain was the Speccy, Amstrad, CPC. Yeah, so Spain was a big target market for the Spectrum as well. I don't know what was going on in France at the time. Oh, so it was a cartridge machine. Okay, but it was a proper computer. Okay, it had cartridges as well. Yeah, because cartridges kind of came along for the 8-bit computers a bit later on, but they never really were all hugely popular by comparison to tape loading and all that sort of stuff. So the Archimedes version, now that's a 16-bit. Okay, so we'll cover the 16-bit stuff in the future at some point. But yeah, so the and the Archimedes was basically, I suppose, really the successor to the BBC, wasn't it? It was a RISC, it was a RISC-based PC, and it was RISC-based computing, reduced instruction set computing was a big deal at the end of the 80s, because it was sort of touted that most processors were what they called CISC, which was complex instruction set thing. So your processor, the CPU, the core of your computer, would have an instruction set that allowed you to program with it, right, in machine code at the operating level at assembly, and it would have various commands, right? But some of those commands were very complicated for the CPU to work out. So, and you had lots of different ways of using them, and there were lots of variations. Hence the complex instruction set. Whereas the RISC processors were designed to have far fewer operators, but to be able to do those operations really, really quickly. So there was a bit of a battle going on at this point, as the 80s came to a close, between whether RISC computing or CISC computing was actually the best way of doing things. And for a while, the RISC computers were very, very effective. The Acorn Archimedes was a RISC CPU, the ARM CPU, which still, variants of it today still power mobile phones and all sorts of other things. They're really, really quite popular, but they're not in mainstream desktop computing nowadays. At least not very often. But the 68,000, the chip that was powering the Commodore Amiga and the Atari ST, was a complex instruction set chip, right? And so there was a bit of war going now. But the Acorn Archimedes, from what I understood about it, and I only saw one very, very briefly in the 90s, it was but it was wiping the floor, okay, with PCs and the Atari ST and the Amiga in terms of raw capability. It was a phenomenal machine at the time, really, really quite impressive, and you know, it was quite a thing, but it never really caught on in a big way, unfortunately, and it. And I suppose, you know, the Atari ST and the Amiga didn't last all that long. The Commodore went on a bit longer, but then by the sort of mid '90s, so the Apple Macs had PowerPC, yeah. By the mid '90s, the PC and the Pentium x86 architecture, despite all its flaws, right? The 68000, in my view, was a far better chip than the 8086. But that 8086 architecture, because of compatibility and standardization and IBM's clever idea to license the design but not charge for it, meant that everybody could make a cloned PC, right, relatively cheaply. So the x86 architecture won not because of its technical superiority, but because of compatibility. It's the same VHS versus Betamax versus Blu-ray versus HD DVD and all that sort of stuff. It's those arguments, right? Not usually the best technical solution doesn't win. It's the one with the backing and the compatibility that usually wins out. And that's what happened with the 8086, right? It replaced the RISC processors on the desktop, and eventually it replaced the 68000s as well, even though arguably they were better. And again, Kelly Baglaw makes the point that the software support was for the PC. And so the PCs we have today can trace their ancestry back to those early 8086 computers that took all that sort of stuff out. So it's this funny old thing, isn't it? Right, so where am I? What am I doing? I'm in DSO. I should be buying food. So we've probably got time for a couple more runs. 16, there we go, that's good. And we haven't quite got enough money for the beam laser yet, but we've got the fuel scoops and we've got the ECMs. That's progress. We're doing all right. We're doing all right. Let's go back to Leasty. Oh, make sure to save. Always save. There we go. So yeah, that's the story that happens after this 8-bit era, right? But all through that time, Elite is a thing, right? Elite is a game. Now, Elite gets ported, originally written on the BBC and transferred to this Commodore 64 by David Braben and Ian Bell. Then they sort of, David Braben in particular is very smart that he keeps the rights to the game but allows those rights to be sold for other platforms. So that's when we see, right, now we've got Pirate and Leasty. That's unusual. Somebody fancies trying. So it appears on the Spectrum, but not written by David Braben and Ian Bell, ported. Now we can open fire with impunity because we don't need to worry about the missiles, right? I shot it anyway, so I haven't had a chance to use my ECM. Oh, let's use it anyway. There we go. Shot his missile down. Nice. Oh, we've got a fuel scoop, so we can pick up the cargo. Right, let's see if I can do some. I haven't done this. This is the first time I've done this in like 40 years. 35 years. Is scooped a piece of cargo on the Spectrum version. So what we've got next might be an escape pod. So, or is it? No, it looks like that looks like a cargo canister. So basically, you have to kind of keep it in the lower half of the screen at less than half speed to pick it up, and of course it's drifting through space, so that's not necessarily this thing. I've got that wrong. Not necessarily the easiest thing to do. There we go. Don't want to go too fast. There we go. Right, have we got enough cargo space on board? I think we have, and we'll find out what that is. We got some liqueur and some wines. Very nice. So that's worth a little bit of money. What's this then? Is this an asteroid? Yes, I think it is. Now we haven't got the mining laser yet, so we can't do anything useful with it. Right, that's another kill though, worth having. Right, so there we go. So we've done some fuel scooping as well. We're seeing a few more bits of the game now, right? So now the whole trader and the scavenging aspect of the game starts to open up to us because we've got the fuel scoop, right? Will there be any left by the time I get to this? Don't worry about it, guys. It'll be fine. It'll be fine. Right. So let's get to the station. That will probably conclude today. I think we've done well. We've done well. So the ship is looking good. We've done some cargo scooping. We've shot down some engines. We've got an ECM. Our next objective, I think, is maybe to get the beam laser. That means we're a properly defended ship, right? And then maybe the docking computer, so we can speed up the acquisition of the next parts of the game. So we've got a basically defended ship now, which is good progress to have made. We've got a little bit of cash in the bank. We've got 3,000 credits. We're not rich by any stretch of the imagination yet, but we are making. Now that's after 4 hours of gameplay, right? So you can see how the progress of the game is slowed down, but it doesn't. Oddly enough, this is the funny thing about this. Comparing this to Elite. Now, I am effectively, comparing this to Elite Dangerous, I am effectively grinding here, right? To use the modern name. Now, we never called it back in the day because it was, so somebody pointed out last week, it's just playing the game. But this stuff hasn't felt to me like, I know I'm chatting to you guys, so I've got something to do, right? But it hasn't felt like I'm waiting for gated content. And I don't know whether that's because that's, I'm just in a more simplistic frame of mind because I'm playing an 80s 8-bit game, or whether the game is doing a better job of keeping me entertained as I, work through the process of getting more cash. I don't know. Because there's obviously a tendency for me here to be looking at this through very, very rose-tinted spectacles, but I've enjoyed playing it. Okay, we've been here for 2 hours, right, playing this game, and I don't know about you guys. I mean, you're still on the stream, right? So I kind of assume you've got something out of it as well. I suppose, maybe it's expectations. I know what this game is going to do, right? And whilst I do want to see these missions, which I do remember doing the Supernova Mission back in the day, but I haven't seen the others, so I do want to see if we can check that. And maybe we are floating on the wave of nostalgia. You're quite possibly right, but I've for what this game's limitations are, I feel it's done a good job of keeping me entertained. I'm not bored. I could keep doing this for a lot longer, right, rather than just 2 hours. If I had the time, which I don't, I could easily go another couple of hours playing this. Whereas I do find with Elite Dangerous, I will play for maybe an hour or two doing a thing, but whereas I feel like I've achieved quite a lot here. I've got an ECM, and I've got a cargo bay, and I've got a fuel scoop. I don't know, maybe it just takes longer in Elite Dangerous to get somewhere. I don't know. I don't feel like I'm kind of looking at some really difficult thing in the future that I haven't got. There's a massive level of playing I have to get to. I'm sort of playing the game, I suppose, and maybe that's the point. Maybe it's to do with the attitude you have and what you bring to it. I try and avoid doing any kind of grinding games because I don't like that. The only one I have done in Elite really was the rank in the Empire to get the Imperial Clipper because I really fancied that ship. So that's the only one I've really done. And look at that! I've also achieved a new rating. I'm poor. So we've made real progress today, right? So there we go. And so I don't know. I mean, what do you guys think? I mean, I don't know. Maybe our expectations of modern games are just that much better. But I've talked about before about this is 1984. Okay, and the design for this game stems back into even further than that. So there was this was relatively revolutionary in doing away with 3 lives and a high score. Right, there's only money and reputation in Elite. So that was quite radical. Whereas games today do seem to be about achievements, unlocks, and gated progress as a design thing. And that I don't know what the answer is, but I always think to myself there must be another revolutionary type of gameplay that can supersede that sort of design. I don't know. I'm not a game designer, but there we go. Never mind. Right, so let's just finish up for today. We have, and let's sell our. How much do we get for that? So let's just check out the price list here. Where's the price list? How do I get the price list up? There it is. Liquor wine. So we've got 33 credits for picking up that piece of cargo. So that's worthwhile when we only got 17 credits for shooting the ship down, right? So that's quite that's actually quite lucrative, right? So we've done all right there. So we're in listed. Let's make sure we fill up with the correct cargo. So there's 27 tons available there, and then we'll buy another 8 tons of machine. These are 1,000 credits actually. So I think we should buy at this point. We should buy the beam laser. Let's finish off today. Do one more run. I want to run through run through DSO. Sell this lot off. I want to buy the beam lasers. Okay, so that's going to eat into our cash, but it gives us a good solid ship, right? So let's do that. And we can put the extra beam lasers. Where should we put it? We get it on the front. I think we get a refund for the pulse laser. So that's actually a good thing, right? Yeah, we do. We get a refund for the pulse laser. So there we go. That's good. So now we've got large cargo bay, fuel scoops, ECM, and the beam laser, right? Okay, so we are good. Right, let's do the one more run, and then we're done. And then we'll come back next week and see if we can maybe do some more interesting stuff now that we've got a half decent ship. Let's get the fuel. We're now prepped, and we're poor. Our rating's gone up. I'm no longer mostly harmless. I am now poor. So there we go. Let's save the game. Let's launch, and we will do one last run. I'm hoping we meet something here because I want to show you how good the beam lasers are by comparison to the pulse lasers. Although they do overheat quite fast. So try the beam laser on the backs of some of the chittens. Yes. Oh yeah, we could do that, couldn't we? I hadn't thought about the. Yeah. So actually, maybe we'll just quickly do that. Right. So here's a pirate. This is good. Right. Here's a pirate coming in. Looks like there might be 2 of them actually. No, it's just 1. Sometimes they will appear in packs of 2. Now we've got a beam laser here. So this is a Cobra. So we've also got our ECM. So this should be a walk in the park now. So you notice it's got continuous fire. Incoming missile. I'm sorry. Yeah. So it makes a massive difference. I'll just double check. And it's left some cargo behind as well. So now our ship is much more capable of handling the enemies, right? Because the missiles are no longer a threat unless they're fired at point blank range. And the beam laser means we can dispatch the enemy ships much quicker. But you can see somebody else has taken an interest. I can't pick up any more cargo because I've got a full tank. The only thing I do have to be careful of is I don't have the ability for my energy to recharge very fast. So what I'm going to do here is, because the pirate's coming in, I'm actually going to put him on my rear shield so that my energy banks have a chance to. So again, it's tactics, right? Because I've got a front and a rear shield. Now my my shields have collapsed, so I need to deal with him. Both shields are down, and it's Cobra is taking big chunks out of my energy banks at the moment. So I need to get behind him and stop him from firing on me, so I can take him out. Let's tuck him behind him, and then we'll take him out. Right, get up to speed and let him have it. I've got to be very mindful of my energy. So this is the weakness of the ship right now, is without that extra energy bank, it takes a long time for my energy banks to recharge, and hence my shields. So I have no shields at this point and not much in the way of energy. So I've got to play tactically here and just keep out of range of his guns while pummeling him with my beam laser and then taking his missile out. There we go, we get credited, that's good. So you can see the ship is much better prepared, which is good, for defending itself against piracy, but it's not really quite ready to go into any dangerous systems, because while we can fend off one pirate at a time with ease now, if we get a handful, it's going to cause us grief. But the beam laser is way more potent than the pulse laser, which is good, which is really good. So we might be able to survive a Thargoid thing. So let's get the space station docked. Let's just complete this run. Getting a bit close to this Python. Right view. Should see it bank away, which is always quite nice. I like the way, in fact, that they take evasive action, which is good. nice little bit of immersion as well. They're aware of your presence, which is again quite a cool thing. Unfortunately, we can't. There we go. There's their shields coming back up, which is good. We need to get the Python off the screen because we can't move at the moment. We're jump locked, mass locked, so we can't do anything about that. Now we've got our shields fully up, which is good. So the ship is much more potent, which is nice. Okay, the ship is much more potent at this point in time. There's the space station, which is good. So we can get in there. We'll quickly try a Thargoid incursion with our newly enhanced ship. Let's give that a try. Maybe that should be a thing at the end of every at the end of every game, right? As we should do a Thargoid jump. That's quite good fun. Yeah, I need to run. Yeah, you're quite right, Kelly Megler. I did need to run. Right, so this is the bit that we do want to avoid next week by getting the docking bay, because it takes ages. In fact, we haven't even got into system space yet, which is a bit irritating. So, and where have we got? Tell you what I can do. What I'll do to save a bit of time, because that's going to take us a little while. I'll do a save there. I'll do a quick save there, and we can dock at the end of next time. What I'll do, if I've done a save, if we do a hyperspace jump back to Leasty, we can pause the game. How do we do that? That was that. Then we had to do F, didn't we? Yeah. Then we had to unpause, and we had to hyperspace. So let's go into hyperspace, and I'll come back and do the finish of that run next week. This should give us the Thargoids, and I'll see how we fare this time. There we go. We've got 4 of them this time. That's nasty. Oh, look at the frame rate. Let's get this one. Oh, these things are tough. There goes. My weapons have overheated. I still haven't killed him. So this is where the military lasers come in. There we go. Right, we got that one. Okay, if we get 50 credits for that, which is quite impressive, really. Well, now we're getting seriously hammered. They're still not likely to survive, I wouldn't have thought. This is where the beam laser, it fires quickly, but it rapidly overheats. And I'm in trouble again. And I can't fire because I've got no power, and I've got not enough energy to fire the guns. Still, we can't make it. No. So we're not ready to take on the Thargoids yet. Anyway, my friends, thank you very much for your company. I do appreciate that. That should be a little thing. There we go. Can we take on the Thargoids yet? That's a test for at the end of every stream to see how well we do. But we're not quite there. We're not quite there. On the PC version, in which basically you spawn more and more infinite until you've jumped out or died. Oh, okay. I didn't know that. No, the Spectrum version gives you 3 or 4 normally, and that's it. But you can scoop up the Thargoids. But look, you get 50 credits for killing a Thargoid, so that's definitely worth doing, right? Once you've got a decent ship, particularly when you can force a misjump. So there we go. But anyway, lovely to have your company, everybody. Thank you very much. This is now going to be a regular thing as I try and push them, because I want to capture on the screen the right-on commander, and I want to capture the missions, and I want to capture, hopefully get into it. We've got a poor, we've got a half-decent equipped ship now, so we're getting there, right? We're getting. So thank you very much for your company. Really appreciate it. Back on Mondays for the creative stream, back on Thursdays for the Elite Dangerous Lore Tour. Fridays I do a bit of Stellaris at the moment, and this Saturday is going to be the 8-bit retro stream for the ZX Spectrum for the time being, as we progress on Elite. So thank you very much for your company. Have a great week, rest of the weekend. Look after yourselves, stay safe, all the usual stuff, and well, right on, commanders, right? Take care, my friends. Take care. See you soon.